everyone. I'm your host, Cornelia, and tonight I'm here with Mary Sturgeon. Mary is the mother of Isaac Sturgeon. He is a J6er who was sentenced to 6 years in prison. And Isaac's story is quite unusual because it starts in Kenya in Africa. In early March 2020, armed forces from the Kenya Terrorism Task Force came to arrest him, and they were sent by the FBI to do this. So Mary is here tonight to tell us about Isaac and, tell us the whole story from start to finish, why Isaac was arrested, the legal proceedings against him, the plea deal that he rejected, why he rejected it, and then the draconian sentence. Mary, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Cornelia. It's a privilege to be here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So I think let's just start with this arrest in Kenya. They arrested how many? They arrested, I think the latest number I heard was 1,500 J6ers until today, something like that. And Isaac is probably the only one who was arrested in Africa, or at least Kenya and Africa.
That's probably true. As far as I know, that is the case. And it was pretty surprising. He grew up in Montana, so he's a hunter. And so naturally, after hunting a lot of game, he in his 30s decided to give it a try to hunt in Africa.
Is that something you do a lot in Montana, hunting?
It is, yes.
Okay, I've never been to Montana, but it's very, very few people and lots of what? Moose?
There's elk, deer, antelope, all sorts of game. And usually if you hunt, you always get deer every year, and you usually get an elk every year, and it fills our freezers. It's good natural meat.
Wow, it sounds good. It's probably good.
Yes.
It's probably really delicious. Okay.
Yeah.
So Isaac really knew how to hunt then.
Yes. And so he has a friend over in Africa who guides people on hunts, and he gives him these hunts for half price. So that's an added special benefit. And so I think he has gone over there 3 different times. He had gone for the 2 years prior to this. I believe it was in the afternoon, and he had a pounding on the door, and I believe it could be also, I don't remember for sure, but I think that they actually opened his door. There were 2 resort staff people with the Kenyan police, and so I believe that they unlocked his door, and he's a pretty calm, chill fellow, and he saw 5 Kenyan officials outside of the door, and they were kind of peering around the edge of the door, but being protected by the wall. They didn't have their guns drawn, but they
had guns on them.
Yes, and he said they were acting fearful. He said it was like they had been told that he was a terrorist, and he had heard some rumors about people being arrested for January 6th. This was in March, and the beginning of March, and he was on his hunting trip, and so he didn't really know for sure what was going on. But I think one of his friends had talked about some of the things going on to him, and he had told me later he figured, well, if I am wanted, I have a return ticket. I'll be back home, but I'm going to go on my hunting trip, because it didn't make sense to him. It wasn't a big deal, because he had done nothing wrong. So the Kenyan authorities, the Kenyan police, hovering and standing around the side of the door, looking into the room, they told him that your government wants us to take you and send you back to America. We need to come in and search your room. And he said, come on in. And they searched his luggage and his room. And I believe they found a knife, which scared them. But then I believe that he was allowed to keep it. It was a legal knife to have there. Eventually, they arrested him, put him in handcuffs. and put him in their police car and drove him several hours to the capital, to Nairobi. And
so that was this place where he was. It was far away from Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, right? So he was in the car with these 5 guys.
I don't know if it was a van or a car or how many accompanied him. There could have been some local people, and then I don't know for sure, but they kept him in his handcuffs for, I believe, it was between 7 and 9 hours. It was an all-night drive, and it was uncomfortable. And then they brought him to the Nairobi police station, or at least that's what he thought it was, and they questioned him there, and he was pretty cordial with them. I think that they started warming up to him because of what he was saying, but I believe that they maybe even talked about the January 6th situation, and he described some of it, and they were surprised at his take on it, that it wasn't a bunch of terrorists and people attacking the Capitol. It was moms and dads and older people and young people just protesting peacefully. And so,
that's it. But it's interesting that they had heard about this, right? I mean, well, I guess it was something. So the pictures must have gone around the world. So I guess it does make sense that they saw it and knew something about it.
It was framed in a certain way, so anyone who watched the news were given a certain impression of what they were supposed to believe about it. I forgot to say that, so Isaac was on his way to Namibia, but he was stopping in Kenya. He has friends there, and he was just relaxing a little bit, and he was on his way to hunt, but also, before he was going hunting, he was going to see his newborn or very young daughter in Namibia. And he had not seen her yet and had not been able to hold her or anything. However, the FBI sent the Kenyan police to raid his motel room. And since then, they took his passport, they confiscated that, and they never allowed him to leave the country after that. So he's never been able to hold his daughter. He has talked with her on the phone, and she calls him Papa, and I'll show you a picture of her. Let's see if I can get that there.
Yeah, I can see her. That's her 4th birthday then. So she was born the end of 2020. Is that correct? So what an interesting situation. So he was there in Kenya visiting some friends before he went on to Namibia to go hunting, but also to see his newborn daughter that he had never seen before. In the midst of all this, he's being arrested by this Kenyan terrorism task force and brought back to DC. So what happened? He's put on the plane by himself.
Yes.
Or were there people going with him to make sure he...
Well, they took him to the airport, and I imagine they possibly walked him to the gate, but he had to buy his own... No, they had a ticket for him, but he had to reimburse our government for that ticket. However, they knew that he had a return ticket already scheduled for the following month, after his hunt and after he visited his daughter. And they flew him to New York City, and when he exited off the plane at the gate, some FBI men met him and put him in handcuffs. And
so they arrested him right there at the airport when he came out of the gate.
Yes.
They arrested him.
Yes.
And then they brought him to DC?
No, they took him to a jail in Brooklyn. And I believe he was in that jail for 2 nights, perhaps 3, but maybe 1 or 2 nights. He said that he was interrogated by the FBI, and again, he was cordial. And, some FBI agents are, I don't know, they don't have the right outlook, and the whistleblowers are saying that there's some bad elements in the FBI. However, I think that the FBI agents that were interrogating him, one of them, he said, seemed to realize that something's not right here. This is just a normal fellow who's not a terrorist by any means. But
Interesting.
yeah, they interrogated him, and then he had to go before a judge, and he was appointed a district or Brooklyn district attorney, and she could not accompany him to the DC courts later. He had to get a different attorney, but he said she fought for him because
that was a public defender.
yes.
Okay.
And the prosecutor who was there in the Brooklyn district said that Isaac was a flight risk and that they should not allow him to leave that jail and come home. And they pressed it hard. And I got a text from my husband. I work at a middle school here in Montana, and I got a text from my husband, and he said, I need you to call me right away. And that's not an easy thing to do when you're working.
So wait. So at that point, you didn't know that he had been arrested. When did you find out that he had been arrested? Did he call you from Kenya?
No.
Or when?
He wasn't allowed to call. He called my husband from the Brooklyn jail.
Oh, so your husband gets a call from a Brooklyn jail from his son who he thinks is hunting in Kenya.
Yeah.
And Isaac tells him that, hey, Dad, I'm actually in a Brooklyn prison right now.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, he must have been surprised.
Yes. Yes.
Shocked.
Yes. And I don't think that they talked very long because then eventually within that half hour, my husband was maybe Isaac gave the phone to his attorney, his appointed attorney, and she talked with my husband, and she's the one that said they have a $250,000 bond on Isaac, and they do not want to let him leave because they claim he's a flight risk. And she was trying to convince the judge that no, Isaac goes hunting every year. Look on the records. Look on the flights that he has had. Check it out. He is not a flight risk. But she also told him somebody has to put up $250,000 to get him out of that Brooklyn jail.
So wait a moment. So $250,000 bond, that's a huge bond.
Yeah. Yes.
And who sets this bond? Was it the judge?
I think so.
Do you know?
I think
so. $250,000. That's an enormous bond. Okay, we can talk about that later. So yeah, go on.
All right. So the cool thing, and it was basically a miracle, is that I had an open class period just at the right time where I could be by myself in a room that was not being used. And my husband called me and said, this attorney said that we need to get as many people as we can on a conference call with her and the judge and the prosecution, and ask people to put up their homes and their livelihoods as bond.
Oh my God. What?
Isaac. Yeah.
Like, who do you ask? I mean,
well, we have good friends here in Dillon, Montana, and friends who know Isaac. In total, I believe we had 8 people, including relatives, my sister and her husband, and a couple of my brothers that we could get a hold of. And
so how quickly did you rally them together?
I texted and I called as quickly as I can. I believe it was within 45 minutes to an hour that they were all.
Wow, that's quite a record.
Yes, and several.
That's amazing.
It was a miracle. Several friends. We had
and they all of course they all know Isaac really well.
Yes.
Did they also know that he had gone to the Stop the Steal demonstrations in DC?
I believe so because because we had all talked about it. And if I hadn't brought anybody up to speed, I told them that's what happened and that he had been arrested for it. They didn't want to let him out of the jail. in New York City. There's a bunch of us going to gather together and talk to the judge and be willing to put our homes on the line for this. And they said, absolutely, we will do this. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many people put their homes on the line to get Isaac out of jail on bail?
There were, I believe, 7, and there were 8 people on the conference call because one of the spouses was with them. And the judge went through and talked to each homeowner and asked them, how much do you make in a year? And I don't remember the amounts, but it wasn't very much. And I think that by the time he spoke with each person on that conference call, I think that it astounded him that these people don't have a lot of money. They're just average middle-class people. And out here in Montana, we don't make a lot of money. And he allowed Isaac, he said, all right, I'm going to let him go home. He's going to wear an ankle bracelet, but we will release him to you folks. And they wrote down all the information, and they
wait, so the judge was the one who had set this enormous bail, right? The $250,000.
Yes.
So, and he evidently was surprised that you managed to get 7 people together to put their house on the line in 45 minutes. That's quite a feat. I mean, that really means that there were 7 people just ready to be there for Isaac, trust him, get him out of there. So that's probably took him by surprise, because the only reason I can think of setting such a huge amount of bail for practically nothing, as we will see soon, is that he thought it's not going to happen. They don't have that money, because if you can't pay the bail, then you have to stay in jail.
That's right. I hadn't even really thought about that, but I agree. He probably
so he must have been shocked.
I know.
I mean, what is that? Who are these people in Montana making barely any money, and there they are 45 minutes later, putting their houses online for this young man.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, some of my relatives, one lives in Texas, one lives in Illinois, another brother lives in West Virginia. So all of that whole mix was a miracle. It was amazing. It was God. Yeah. I know. It was it was the Lord taking care of it.
So Isaac gets out of jail, which is really amazing, because so many J6ers were not released on bail. And I don't know what happened there. I think some of them just weren't even offered bail.
Right.
They had to stay in prison, which is unusual. I mean, usually, even in some murder cases, from what I don't know, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but there are murder cases, in many murder cases, the suspect will not be released on bail, but sometimes they will. The bail is high. It's like $1 million or so.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the J6ers whose charges were not murder, but something way less severe, were not released on bail and had to stay in prison the entire time until they either signed a plea deal or until the trial, correct?
That's correct. Yes. And there's still one for sure that has still not gone to trial because they're not providing all of the evidence. They're withholding evidence. And there's plenty who were not released. They were kept in prison for years, from 21 until now. And I'm very thankful. Everyone has, in this whole thing, everyone has gone through similar things, but different things. There's been nothing consistent with our government as to how they're treating these people.
So, just tell me, before we go to January 6th, what happened there. Tell me just briefly who you are, where are your family, a little bit about your son, that we get to know Isaac a little bit better. We already know that you have lots of friends and great brothers and relatives. But tell me a little bit more about Dillon, which is a little town in Montana, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
What's it like? What's it like there? What's your life like? What's your profession?
Um, I work at the middle school. I have worked um, when I started having children, then I was a stay-at-home mom, and prior to that, I was a bank teller, and then I taught in a school for a while as the kids were getting a little older, um, and then I finished with that and just became a
What did you teach? Just what did you teach?
well, it was a private school, and um, I was um, in charge of several different subjects. My specialty is English and music. That's what I have my teaching degree in. So that was a very good experience, and our children were in that school for many years. Then I went into substitute teaching in the public schools here, and I enjoyed that very much. And they urged me to go full time. And so when my husband retired, I decided to go full time as a paraprofessional. I just wanted to assist the teachers. I don't want to be in charge of lesson plans. And as I'm getting older, I just want to enjoy being an assistant. So that's what I do full time at our middle school here. And we've raised our kids here. We've been here for over 40 years. So all three of our kids have grown up here, and they love the outdoors. And of course, they're grown and married. Isaac's not married yet, but he runs his own business or prior to his arrest or his incarceration.
What business does he have?
He runs landscaping and lawn care, and he has lots of large equipment, and he takes care of ranches. He takes care of businesses in town. He takes care of little old ladies' houses in town, and he travels all over the county. It's a huge county that we live in. And so he's an entrepreneur. Started.
All right. So he has, it's probably a huge county because there's so few people. There are way more elk and deer.
Yes.
And foxes in Montana than people, right?
Yes.
It's not, okay. So
there's more cattle in this county than there are people by far, you know. So.
All right. How many cows do you have?
You know, I should have brushed up with my husband on the size of the county and all of the statistics, but it's a beautiful place. You know, we have the mountains, and it's a great place to raise the kids.
And Dillon is a small town, like 5,000 people.
Yes.
Is that 5,000 people? That's really small. That's like a big village, right?
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
So that means everybody knows everyone else. Pretty much.
Everyone knows.
What's it like to live there?
Well, when I go to the grocery store, my kids know Mom's going to take a longer time than she plans on because I stop and visit with people that I know, you know. So
you just knock on their doors and say hello?
Well, when I go to the grocery store, there's a lot of encounters with people that maybe I haven't seen for a while, and people that I know. And anywhere you go in town, there's people that you know, that I know. And I can tell you about when all of this hit the news, but I could wait for that. I can tell you about that later if you'd like. No, I would do.
Yeah, let's talk about that later let's do that later because let's get to January 6th and what actually happened there and why Isaac was arrested. So tell me, why did he go? Why did he decide to go to the Stop the Steal demonstrations? And I also want to add that the Stop the Steal demonstrations, those were one of the largest demonstrations ever in D.C. I mean, it must have been hundreds of thousands of people there that had come to D.C. from all over the United States to protest against the many election irregularities. And Isaac was one of them. So tell me, why did he go? Was he with other people? And why was it important for him to be there?
Yes. He was in Florida. In the wintertime, he likes to travel because his business is mostly in seasonal. And he has
because you're covered in snow in the winter, right? It's all snow. No mowing, no lawn mowing.
Right. And actually, a lot of men who run their own landscaping business, they sometimes in this area, they will do snow shoveling in the winter. But Isaac preferred not to do that. But he does have one young man who would snow shovel Isaac's clients, some of the older people in town that needed help. So he would hire that young man to do it while he was gone.
Okay.
And
so he would use the winter to travel. He would take off the winters, the off season, to travel to see the world.
Yes, and he's been to Mongolia and China. He went to Auschwitz to see that. He's been to Germany.
He went to Auschwitz
Yes.
in Poland.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Yeah. When did he go to Auschwitz?
Oh, probably maybe 2019, possibly.
2019. Right.
And he's been in Italy. He has a few pictures that he took kind of incognito, but he parked his vehicle several blocks away and just walked around downtown and decided that he wanted to experience what it was like to sleep on the streets. And he actually, in Italy, in Rome, he has compassion in that area, but he wanted to experience it. And, of course, he made it clear that it's nothing like actually living that way from day to day. But he put that on Instagram.
So he actually slept on the street in Rome somewhere.
Yeah, under a cardboard box.
So what did he find out? What was it like?
He said the people are friendly. Some of them are messed up with drugs. They're friendly, but they keep to themselves. And in the morning, the area he slept in, the city workers would come by and hose everything off. So everybody had to get out of there pretty quickly. And it was an interesting thing.
Well, were they amazed that there was an American? I mean, I assume that the homeless people in Rome are mostly Italians, or maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that's not the case. But they are probably not American.
No, right. I don't think that he talked an extreme amount with the people, but I think they were friendly but standoffish. They kept to themselves, but yet they were. He didn't feel like he was in danger. And then he has been in Mongolia, so I'll show you. That's him in Mongolia, and then he taught English to preschoolers in China. That was his very first trip many, many years ago. And then in Africa, this is the kind of guy he is. So that's him laughing with the kids. So in January of 2021, he was in Florida renewing his skydiving license. He had to do certain tests and things. And we got a phone call from him, and he said, I heard that there's a rally in D.C., a Trump rally. And he said, wouldn't that be historic to go be in D.C. and go to a Trump rally? And because we've all been to several Trump rallies as a family, or various people in our family. We've been to different Trump rallies when we could go here in Montana. And so we were excited for him. And he went to the Trump rally, and I'm pretty sure that he knew that there were people talking to him. Well, actually, no, I should back up from that. I don't think that he knew for sure about the counting of the votes. He was mainly excited to go to the rally, and he heard the president speak, and the president said, let's walk over to the Capitol. And as somewhere in that whole time frame, whether it was on the way to the flying from Florida, because there were a lot of people that were going, I believe that he realized there was something going on. You know, he's young. He's not paying attention to politics a lot. However, he likes Trump and voted for him. But
so he wasn't really aware of all the election irregularities that had happened.
He might have been. I think that he had read some things just like we had, and I had read about it. But I don't know for sure. I don't think he knew that that was the day they were having the electoral counts until perhaps it was being talked about in the crowd during the president's speech. And he at that point, he walked over to the Capitol and realized, you know, we're going to protest peacefully, and also to show our support to the congressmen or to the senators who were saying, no, we want a recount. And that's all it was. The people in the crowd were saying, we just don't want the votes to be certified yet. And that's part of our constitution. We just want you to send the votes back to the states and check the irregularities and do a recount. And many of the senators were going to vote against that. So that's what he did. He walked over to...
So he was first at the ellipse listening to Trump's speech, right? Which is where everybody was at that point.
Right.
And then once Trump had finished his speech, he walked with most of the people who had listened to the speech. He walked over the mile or so to the Capitol grounds.
Correct. Yes, that is correct.
So what happened then? And he was alone. There was nobody. He was doing this on his own, right?
Right. Yeah, it was kind of a spur of the moment, impulsive thing that he decided to go attend. And I have read accounts that there were 1 million people there, and I tend to believe it. This is a picture of him standing in the crowd over at the ellipse, and then I'm going to show you another picture that shows you. Look at that.
Oh, there's the Lincoln. That's the what's that? The Washington Memorial.
The Washington Monument, and you see
the Washington Monument.
Yeah,
sorry.
All of the people who were there. It was just astounding how many people were there for as far as the eye could see. And there is a couple of pictures that I will show you. Oh, here they are. He commented online. He said, "This is the crowd as we were walking from the Trump rally over to the Capitol." He said it was a happy crowd. It was like a party. Everybody was happy and excited to go over to the Capitol. Many people had never even been in Washington, D.C. And so it was a very happy crowd. And he was walking among the crowd, taking pictures. And as he approached the Capitol, he was on the sidewalk. He didn't see any barriers anywhere, but he was on the sidewalk walking along. And I think some of the crowd must have gone to another area, so it was thinned out a little bit. He was more by himself, but there were people behind him. And he continued walking until he got to the top of some steps where there was a police barricade at the top of some steps outside of the Capitol. And I believe
so the Capitol is, the Capitol is, first of all, it's gigantic. It's huge. And it has lots of steps on one side, and it also has lots of steps on the other side. So he walked up the steps. He walked up some of the steps to the Capitol building. Are these the steps you're talking about?
Yes, they were some steps on one of the sides. I think it was some steps that were going up to the West Plaza, but I believe he was down lower on the outer parts. And
okay, so he walked up some steps to the building, and you said that there was no indication that there were no barriers to be seen anywhere around the Capitol.
Right. And we've taken our
So
family there to see the Capitol 2 or 3 times over the years. And it is tricky to see, like, there are some sidewalks that might have some posts sticking up, but I've walked right through that before and then later realized, oh, maybe that meant I wasn't supposed to be there, but it wasn't tied off. It was still open. You could walk through. But then our kids and ourselves learned, okay, if those posts are there, they go in and out of the ground. And so the sidewalks were clear where he was going.
yeah, actually, it's interesting. These polars, or I don't know what you call these things that come out of the ground so that you can't drive in there. They were not up; they were down,
Correct.
from what I read. So
Right.
it wasn't, not even those things were up.
No.
And I also read that the barriers were pushed in while Trump was talking at the ellipse, and there were very few people in front of the Capitol at that point because there was no action there. Everybody was listening to Trump's speech. But there were some people, and they started pushing in these these metal barricades. They are really flimsy things. They're like bike racks. They're easy. They are not heavy. They're not very heavy. They're not very long. You can just, a couple of people can just pick them up. It's easy to push them over. They're not any kind of serious barrier at all. And that was the only thing that was there, together with some police, way too little police, of course, for this enormous, absolutely enormous event. And everybody knew it was going to be huge. There was absolutely no doubt about it. So the security measures were a complete joke. Totally, totally insufficient for any kind of big demo. And any big city in the world knows if you have a huge demo plan and they had the permits and everything, you've got to have the police there just in case something happens. And in particular with this kind of demo, you would have expected to have Antifa there, right? Trying to cause mayhem or starting a fight with the Trump supporters, because they always show up. So they used to always show up at any Trump rally, and the police would be there to make sure to keep keep them separate from the Trump demonstrators, or from the Trump supporters who were in the Trump rally.
Yes. And I did not know this until a couple of years later, that there had been a rally a couple of months prior to January 6th where Antifa or BLM attacked Trump supporters. So there were citizens who attended the January 6th rally purposefully there to make sure they were aware that people had been attacked in the past, and they were there just to make sure and protect women and children and older men. And I don't know how. I just have heard various defendants talking about that they knew that was a possibility, and so they wanted to be there and take care of people besides just attending the rally. So that was an interesting perspective.
So I read that about 10,000 people entered the Capitol grounds that had been restricted by these ridiculous bike things that were no longer visible when the crowd actually showed up there. They were gone. And so which means that probably almost all of these 10,000 people had no idea that they were walking on restricted ground, that they were trespassing, in other words.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and I've seen video of, there was some kind of a plastic mesh fencing also. And I believe I have the video of that, of some man kind of, you couldn't see his face. And I've seen more than one, but different people. But they, like one man, you could see on the video, he knew exactly what he was doing. He walked up to it, he took it down and put it to the side. And then other places, another man just pushed it down. It was, like I said, just a mesh fencing that was way out on the outer parts of the grass. And then, of course, people figured he's official because he sure knew what he was doing. And people walked through there because it was open and there were no signs. And in Isaac's trial, they had a diagram of the Capitol grounds, and Isaac's attorney proved that he never knowingly crossed any boundaries, and people had no idea. If you've never been to D.C., you don't know. You don't even know that you're not allowed to just walk in the building, because you can walk into our courthouse here, you can walk into our state capitol freely, in and out. And
yes, it's a public building. It's a building for the American people.
Right. And of course, there were police at the doors of the Capitol when they opened the doors somehow. But the police were telling people to come in. And what do? My instinct would be to obey the police officer. So that was
right. But Isaac never went. But Isaac never went inside. No. He did not go into the. So what happened? So he walks up some of these steps on one of these sides of the Capitol.
Yes.
And
so
what happened then?
He was walking up to like two landings of big wide cement steps, and at the top of the top landing there was a police barricade, metal like bike racks, and I don't think there were many police standing up there. There were a few police standing up there, but he walked up to that landing and stopped and, chatted with the police. And because he'd never seen anything like this, where there was so many people, and they were allowed to stand on that side of the barricade where he was. And so as he stood and chatted with the police and just told them he appreciated them, and things.
Oh, wait. So he was standing next to these policemen, Capitol Police, and he chatted with them, told them that he appreciated them.
Yes.
So it sounds very cordial.
Yeah, that's the
doesn't
way.
Sound like.
Yeah, no, he was just there quietly. He because, as I told you, he loves to travel. He loves to observe and watch people, and he'll do that very quietly. But yet he's friendly. So he was standing there, and as he was there, the crowd behind him, the crowd started filling in and coming up those steps and started to build behind him and around him, and he was still right by the barricade. And as the crowd was building, there were other people all against the barricade. Some were just talking with each other, and by that point in time, they had information more about the count of the votes in the House. And some people were saying, this is our House, and we want the senators to know that we don't want them to certify the votes. And they were saying that to the police, and the police were just standing there. And a couple of people were becoming aggressive as far as with their words and cursing at the police. And in the courtroom, I could see on the body cam, on the video, Isaac standing there quietly with his hands in his pockets, looking down that line along the barricade and looking at one guy that you could see just angrily cursing at the police. And you could see Isaac look at him and just look back down and just shook his head. Like, what are these people doing? And then also there was a man with a bullhorn there that kept saying some things over and over. And it was very difficult to hear it until I listened to the video over and over. So in the moment, I don't think Isaac knew what he was saying until he heard it several times. But that fellow was trying to get the crowd to move the barricade. And so eventually...
And the police was standing behind the barricade,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
So the protesters were on one side, then there was this bike rack, really not much of a barricade at all. It's quite low. And then on the other side were several policemen.
Yeah, I think the police were filling in and starting to... there were more police coming to that area because of these people who were not being peaceful. Well, they were peaceful, but they were just talking and yelling and saying too much. And it was a big crowd, so it's noisy. But they were starting to fill in the ranks because of the man with the bullhorn. And yes, the people still stayed on their own side. I did see the police spray the man that was cursing. They sprayed him with a gas spray. I don't know if it's pepper spray or gas spray, which that was probably uncalled for if he's just saying things. But, you can't see everything on the video completely. And they didn't give us the overhead surveillance to observe. So we only saw certain angles in the courtroom. But eventually, it was very obvious to Isaac that something about to happen, and so he.
And let's come back to that later with the videos that was not allowed as evidence in the trial.
Right. Isaac realized that the police were tensing up. Oh, and he even said at one point, he said to one police officer, he said, "I would hate to be in your shoes, the way this whole thing is with the crowd here." And also something was thrown from way back in the crowd. Just, I don't know if it was a small Leatherman kind of a tool thing, but it had been thrown toward the police, and it hit a woman next to him, and she kind of went, "Ow," and Isaac looked down and picked it up, and he showed it to the police, and they just looked at it, and then he just dropped it over the edge of the barricade on their side, so he couldn't get into trouble for anything.
Right. So the woman was hit by some sort of tool in the neck?
In the head, yeah. And it was
the head, and she went down, you said?
No, she didn't go down, but it's just a real small type of a tool. And, if that could have been undercover people trying to stir up the crowd, it could have, I don't know what it was, but so Isaac picked it up and got rid of it so no one else could do that. And so then as he realized the police were tensing up and they were getting ready to push that barricade, and people on this side of the barricade could see that's going on, and so he took his hands out of his pockets and just got ready, because he was at the top of the steps. He was up on the landing, and the steps were right behind him.
He was right next. So he was right in front of this barricade, right? Because he had been the first one, or one of the first people walking up the steps. So he just walks up the steps until he hits the barricade, thinking that, okay, I'm allowed to go up to here and no further. So he stops at the barricade, and lots and lots of people then come after him until it gets really crowded, apparently. And then there are people in the crowd who start yelling and cursing the police. And the police. So for the police, it's an awful situation. They are there, a few of them. I mean, not many, and they see that more and more people coming, and it's most of them apparently were peaceful, but there were some people who were starting to make trouble, and they were really close to the barricade. So the situation was kind of getting, maybe not out of control, but certainly was kind of getting uncomfortable for the. I mean, there were so many people. It was like 10,000. I saw 10,000 people on the grounds alone, and then hundreds of thousands of people behind them.
Yeah, and there were
on the lawn.
There were more than that, I'm sure, because I have other pictures of the people that were over at the Capitol.
Yeah, so it's an awful situation for everyone. It's an awful situation for the police, who never should have been in that position. Totally undermanned, completely ridiculous. Absurd, really, completely irresponsible. And so then you have some, as you always do in these big, if there's a big demonstration and emotions are high, and probably lots of disappointment and rage, and some people start yelling around, and so the tension builds up. And what happened then?
The barricade started being pushed. I think, it happened so fast, and it only happened within just a few seconds that changed his life. But the police and some of the aggressive people, I think they all just started pushing on that barricade, and Isaac, he had to grab it because he was being pushed backward down the stairs. And so he had to, he had to kind of hunch down, and he had to grimace to try to keep himself from falling back on all of the people behind him. But eventually, Now,
And he was on a step too. There were steps behind him. He was standing on a step.
oh,
So it sounds like some of these people who were yelling and cursing and started pushing the metal barrier towards the police. The police, of course, pushes it back. What else? What else are they going to do? And they are pushing it back against the protesters. Isaac is the first one in line. So he's worried about falling backwards on top of all the other people. Pretty nightmarish situation, actually. I saw one picture. I don't know if you have that, but you can see how Isaac went down to his knees, kind of to his knees,
mm-hmm.
holding up his hands against this metal barricade that was coming down on him to protect himself from being hit, or his chest being hit by the barrier.
Yes.
And it looks like he's in distress. So did he get hurt when that happened? It looks like he might have been in danger of getting hurt.
Yeah, he did. The police claimed that the people were trying to lift up the barricade over them. But in one video I could see the barricade going up, but I think both sides, the momentum, that was at one brief point it was going up in the air, but then it was coming back down. And yes, the police pushed the people all the way down the stairs. Everyone fell. Isaac ended up at the very bottom, and he commented,
How many steps were there? How many steps did he fall down?
I would say, I'm not sure, but I would say probably 20 steps. Cement.
And all the people behind him, so everybody fell down these steps?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So he hurt something pretty bad in his shoulder, pectoral area. But he's very physical. He's very healthy. He works out. And when he finally, he doesn't tell me a lot. He doesn't want to worry me, but he commented one time, I said, "You got hurt?" He said, "Yeah, but I'm working it out. I'm working on it and taking care of it, and it'll get better, but yeah, I got bruised up and I got hurt." And you can see also, he said, when we all fell to the bottom and I finally stood up, he said there was another barricade, a different kind of a barricade, maybe like a sawhorse type, that was flipped upside down with one of the legs sticking up. And he said, I walked over and just tipped it up so no one else would get hurt and get stabbed basically by that leg.
Yeah, by falling on that thing. Right.
And he said, and I saw in the video, the police were shouting at him and very mad at him. And he just went, "I'm just sorry. I'm just fixing it," and at that point, that was way down the steps. And at that point, he stood around for a minute, and then he exited the area, kind of went up to the side and went elsewhere, and took pictures, because it was a historical event, just like he does when he goes overseas. He takes pictures and videos, and
right. So he stayed in the area. He fell down all these steps, and with it sounds like hundreds of other people must have fallen down the steps. Must have been quite a heap of people at the bottom of these steps, from what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So he gets up, brushes himself off, and then walks around further, takes in the scene, takes pictures. So at that point, it sounds like he had absolutely no clue that what had just happened was going to land him in jail. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. And he did say to me at one point, he said, I thought about leaving when I realized what the crowd was, some of the people in the front were acting like, and he said, but of course there was a big crowd behind me, makes it difficult to get out. But he said, I also, hearing what people were saying about the election process and how they were not sure, they might go ahead and just certify the count, and realizing that just wasn't right, and having heard things in the news prior to that about the problems with some of the voting process, he said, I decided that I should just stay and stand. So
Right.
at that point, he did make a decision, but he had no idea. He was going to just stand peacefully, when he realized the enormity of this and the seriousness of it. And he knew that there was some bad things going on with the election process. And so he said, Mom, I just decided, I it doesn't look really good what's going on here, but I need to just stand. I need to stand for what's right. And that changed his life.
So he walks around near the Capitol building, never goes inside, takes pictures. How long did he stay there?
He stayed for a couple more nights and did some touring around the
No, I mean at the Capitol building itself.
Oh, I think he left within an hour or two after that event at the steps. I think that event at the steps was around let me see. I think it was around 2. I can look right here. Well, I think it was around 2 in the afternoon or 2:30. See here.
Oh,
Yes.
so that sounds like it was before. Yeah, so that must have been before anybody entered the Capitol building itself.
Probably
Before the windows, or had that already happened at that point? I don't think so, right? At 2 a.m.
Or 2 p.m. or 2:30 p.m.
Sorry, of course, 2 p.m.
Right. Yeah, so he did stay around for at least another hour. I'm guessing maybe he left perhaps around 4 or 4:30. He just stayed long enough and to see he had a video. He went up higher. He kind of climbed up some bleachers or something like that, and if he wasn't supposed to, he didn't know that he wasn't supposed to, but
He climbed up. He climbed up what?
I think some bleachers maybe that were being prepared for the
inauguration. Okay, for the inauguration.
I think so. And
yes,
a lot of people were doing that. There were people everywhere. The entire place was covered with people, plus way out on the grounds. So there were hundreds of thousands of people there. And he got at a good vantage point so that he could take some videos. And he has one video. After I looked at it again, he sent our family a lot of videos. I said, "That's Roseanne Boyland. That's that they're trying to revive. That she is the one."
Oh, he took a video. He took a video of her while that was happening.
He was way up higher at a distance, and he was taking a picture of a man doing CPR on a woman who had just been beaten by a cop, by a police officer,
right.
And it was at that tunnel area. So that was very interesting to me. And he told me, he did say, he said, "Yeah, I was videoing that, and then I stopped, and there was a police officer standing right next to me who never told Isaac to get down until it was time." At one point, eventually, he said, "You need to go now." But
oh, that's interesting. So he was up on these bleachers. There was a police, one of the Capitol policemen right next to him, just standing there. Isaac is filming, and the policeman just stands there, probably also watches what's going on down there, and never says to him, "Hey, guy, you have to get down here. You're not supposed to be here." Nothing like that.
No, not.
At
one point, the police officer said, "Okay, it's time to go now." But as they were standing there and Isaac was videoing, he realized there was a woman dying down there. And he looked at the police officer and said, "There's a woman dying down there. You need to do something." But yet, as soon as he said it, he realized, what could this police officer do? He was very far away. They were up high, overlooking.
Right. It's actually surprising that when you describe the scene with the hundreds of thousands of people on the ground, and some people pushing down the barricades and the police pushing back and people tumbling down the steps. I mean, what's really surprising is that so few people, I don't know how many people were injured, but that there wasn't some sort of panic and people got trampled to death or some, with huge crowds like this are dangerous. And you never know what's going to happen. And it's you can easily have lots of severely injured and lots of people being killed in situations like that. So it's actually quite surprising that Boylan, of course, died, and Ashley Babbitt, of course, well, she was shot, but still, given the number of people that were there and the situation, could have been a lot worse. Okay, so he walks around, and then he decides, yes, of course. Okay, absolutely.
So there were, I believe, 4 people, civilians, who died that day. Kevin Greason, Philip, I just lost the names, but Ashley Babbitt and Roseanne Boyland, and then another man, I believe, named Philip.
And someone had a heart attack, right?
Yes.
One man had a heart attack and died, yes.
Yeah, and no police officers died. One police officer, I think, had a stroke from natural causes the next day. But
that was sickening, yes.
And the news media lied about that. But there was a woman who was in that tunnel area that Isaac was videoing. He was videoing the tunnel area, but he couldn't see inside of it. But later there was a woman, Victoria White, who was, it's like at New Orleans. You have so many crowds, you have to go where the crowd takes you because you're stuck. It's like a sea of people. And she ended up in the tunnel where she didn't intend to be. And the police were trying to push people back out, but the press was so bad, and people on the outside were becoming, some of them, the men who were military veterans, were angry because the police were spraying gas on the men who were trying to resuscitate Roseanne Boylan. So it made some normal Americans very angry. And anyway, Victoria White, I have video of her being beaten mercilessly on the head by police officers in that tunnel as she's trying to get out. And they put her in prison, but she didn't do anything wrong. But the other thing I wanted to comment was that the crowd was peaceful, and the police fired on the crowd with flashbangs. And I have videos, and there's videos online proving that the people standing quietly, and then all of a sudden they're being shot at from the police. And I think that the police were trying to cause a stampede. I think that the police were trying to get average conservative Americans riled up, because they know that at a lot of riots with people that worked. But they realized that these Americans were just all normal, responsible people that did not want to get into a fight with the police.
Yeah, I have seen videos like that too, where there's a huge crowd standing in front of the Capitol. Nobody had breached. I mean, they were just standing there on the steps, but hadn't gotten into the building itself. Nobody had broken into the windows, nothing. They were just standing there. And then I think it was rubber bullets and tear gas or pepper spray or these flashbangs, whatever, are being thrown into the crowd. Now, the police were so underpowered. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know. Either they got a command to do that, which is, if I'm a policeman and I'm standing there and I see this mass of people in front of me, the last thing I want to do is get them angry. I want to calm them down. I want to say, hey, look, everything is fine. You can stand there and it's totally fine, but please stay where you are, be peaceful. What I do not want to do is fire rubber bullets into the crowd, hit some people, fire this pepper spray into the crowd that, of course, affected hundreds, thousands of people and made them angry. And especially coming from the police, because they saw the police as their protector, right? They thought, the police is on our side. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, they are traitors. They are not on our side. They're actually attacking us. So as a policeman, that's the last thing I want to do, especially knowing that I have absolutely no chance. We are in no position to defend the Capitol. And we have been left here by some awful decision of higher ups. we have been left here high and dry and in a completely undefensible position, and it's awful for us. And if this crowd goes wild, we might all get killed or trampled to death, or who knows what's going to happen to us, right? So it doesn't, but who knows? I mean, either they got a command to do this by someone high up, or they panicked and did something really stupid that they shouldn't have done. It's one of these things that we need to find answers to, because nobody knows.
Right. Well,
right now.
And there are videos from body cam from police officers saying we shouldn't be shooting to the crowd. I think a person can go on to a website called stophate.com. There's a lot of evidence out there now, but that website has a lot of various videos. One of the videos and like I said, there's others also. But one of the videos that I saw where police officers said, we should not be shooting into the crowd. He said exactly what you said, Cornelia. He said, we're angering the crowd. We shoot into the crowd, and then 100 more people are getting riled up and stirred up. What are we doing? And then another video that I saw, the police officer was doing something, changing his equipment somewhere away from the crowd, and he was so angry. He said, we have been set up. And he referred to some command that he received, and he said, we've been set up. And he was, so some of the officers didn't.
Well, he was right. I mean, if I had been one of these policemen, I would be so pissed off. Here I am. Everybody knew there would be a huge demonstration. Here I am with a couple of other guys with some flimsy barricades separating me from this enormous crowd. And what the hell? How on earth did this happen? You know, this is so irresponsible, and so to put people in a situation like that. Absolutely, I can totally understand the policeman.
And another comment that I would like to make is that I have over the phone, I have connected with other January 6 people. And there's one wife whose husband is in Isaac's prison. And so we've talked, and I kind of let them know what to expect when he got put into that prison. But she said that, like as with Isaac was given an assault charge, and so was this man. And my friend said that he was being hit with a billy club by a police officer, and he wasn't doing anything wrong, so he grabbed it. And because he grabbed it to stop, to protect himself, thus the assault charge. And then he saw the police spraying gas on some women and older people, and he found a gas can sprayer on the ground near him, so he sprayed back. And that, looking back, it'd be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But yet, you see a man who wants to protect people. That's why the news media, many outlets were already there. They knew, they were told. I think that they were told something ahead of time, but they took video of average citizens spraying police or grabbing a billy club, but it was in self-preservation and protection. And my friend said her husband, when he came back, his entire body was full of bruises from the police beating people. So, there's a lot of untold stories that I keep discovering.
So when Isaac got, he got away. When he left the capital, what did he do? Did he go? You said he stayed a couple more days in D.C. to do some sightseeing, correct?
Correct. Yes. Then he went back.
So he must have felt completely safe that, there was this historic event, and he wanted to be part of it because he realized it was something historic. Mm-hmm. And so, but afterwards, was that the first time he went to D.C.?
No, we've taken him and our characters before. Yeah. But
But so here he is in the capital city. He wants, sorry, go ahead.
He went to Fredericksburg. I don't think he had ever been there before. So he did. I could tell over the phone the evening of January 6th, he said it was turning bad or ugly. So I think that it rattled him a little bit. He realized this is not good. And he didn't like being in a scuffle with the police. He's never been involved in that. So if I put myself in his shoes, I think that it upset him, and to me, it would frighten me a little bit. Even though I knew I did nothing wrong, I would just feel very uneasy. So, but he stayed and did some touring in the outer area.
One question, Mary. You mentioned that when you were standing at this barricade at the Capitol, that he had a cordial conversation with one of the policemen there, and there was some kind of rapport. He also dropped this tool that somebody had thrown and hit that woman next to him. So he gave it to the police. So it was clear that he was friendly with the police. The policeman he talked to, I mean, there must have been several who heard that or saw or talked to him, or at least one talked to him. Did he come to the trial? Was he one of the witnesses?
They did not call him to come. They called a different police officer who was in that group. And he's the only one who injured himself, quote, injured. In the paperwork, it says that a police officer was injured. Well, our attorney, when he was on the stand, she said, "How were you injured?" He said, "Well, I bumped my leg." She said, "You bumped your leg down in your shin?" He said, "Yes." And she said, "Did you go to the hospital?" He said, "No." She said, Did you sit down?" He goes, "Yeah, just for a minute or two." And she said, "Then you were fine?" He said, "Yes." And she said, "Did Isaac assault you? Did he attack you?" And the prosecution said, "Do you remember that young man here in the courtroom?" And he said, "No, I don't." Then they showed him 2 or 3 videos of different angles. And finally he said, "Oh, well, I might have seen him in the crowd." And so in the end, they finally got him to say, "Well, we didn't really make contact, but maybe we brushed shoulders." Thus the assault charge.
What?
Yeah.
Wait. That sounds just totally weird. He might have brushed shoulders accidentally.
Right.
I mean, and he wasn't even sure. So how can you make an assault charge out of that?
Well, also because Isaac touched the barricade, and through the extension of the police touching it and another police bumping into another one, the chain reaction.
Because he touched the barricade. Okay. So, all right. So, let's get back to the prison in Brooklyn. So Isaac is arrested, which I guess after what happened at the Capitol must have been quite a shock to him, or not?
It was.
I mean, did he feel like he should be arrested, that he did something really bad, and now the Department of Justice is eager to go all the way to call the government in Kenya and ask them to send their joint terrorism task force to get him back as soon as possible so they can put him in jail? I mean, it feels so totally surreal.
It was very surreal. It was totally unexpected and extremely shocking. Just very shocking.
Did he have any idea what he would be charged with?
No.
I mean, he touched the barricade. He was up there where he shouldn't have been, which he didn't know. He was friendly with the police. He talked to them.
They never said he shouldn't have been there, because it was proven he was fine. He never crossed the barricade. He walked down a sidewalk that was open. He was in the right place.
So, but one of the charges against him, so there are 7 charges against him, and one of them is entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds.
Correct.
So they charged him with that.
They did, even though his attorney proved that he didn't do that.
So wait, so the attorney proved it and they still didn't drop the charge? How can that be?
That's what they're doing with all the January 6th people. It's already pre-planned. His judge slept off and on during the trial because he already knew what the outcome was going to be. And it actually was, I know we'll talk about this later, but Isaac chose to have a bench trial with no jury because all of the jury pool is being repeatedly used over and over. The same people are used for these trials as jurors, and they are biased because 98% of people in D.C. vote Democrat.
So right. So the trial was in D.C., and it's well known that that's a very problematic place to have a jury trial because as you said, 95% or what are Democrats, and so that's a very unfavorable situation. But what do you mean when you say they use the same jurors over and over again for different trials?
Yes, from the research that I've looked into, I don't have it in front of me, and so I would urge people to look into it. But that is what I have read, that yes, they have a jury pool, but they will go through it for I don't know how many people are in the jury pool, and then some of them have been used repeatedly for some of these trials, which is really sad.
Right. So Isaac, he is arrested in Brooklyn. He's brought to the judge and all that. He must have been completely shocked. I would have been completely shocked. And he is released on bail and brought back, and then he returned to Dillon, right? He returned to Montana.
So he had to purchase a flight. They put a ankle bracelet on him to monitor him.
So, this ankle bracelet, can you see that, or is it hidden the trousers?
You can see it. It's hidden under the trousers, but it would have to, he always wore his socks underneath, I guess. I remember seeing that. So he would it's loose enough you pull your socks up through there. But in the summertime, he still had the ankle bracelet on probably for about a year. And sometimes I would...
For a whole year?
Yeah. And sometimes I would see him in town in between jobs, and he's wearing his shorts. And I said, "Oh, you still have your ankle bracelet?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I need to talk about going to work out at the gym." I said, "So everybody at the gym sees you with the ankle bracelet?" He said, "Yeah, it makes for some interesting conversations sometimes."
I bet. Is that usual that people who are out on bail have to wear ankle bracelets the entire time?
It depends on the seriousness of the crime, I think. And
so his crime was serious. His crime was serious enough to have to pay $250,000 of bail, which is more than, I actually looked it up, it's more than considerably more. Let's have a look here. Manslaughter is $25,000 to $100,000 bail. Kidnapping is $25,000 to $100,000. So there is a range, according to the degree or how the kidnapping occurred, etc. Robbery is $50,000 to $100,000. Assault, $500 to $25,000. Pretty cheap. Assault is pretty cheap. Felony assault is $25,000 to $100,000. Domestic assault is really cheap. Rape is only $25,000 to $50,000. And wow, it's really interesting. Yeah, so his $250,000 bond is just incredible. Just totally inappropriate. And also wearing this stupid ankle bracelet for an entire year.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's back in Montana. He works back he lives with you, or he's back doing his business. Maybe tell me a little bit now. So there he is, Isaac. Everybody in Dillon must have known what happened, right? It must have spread like wildfire when Isaac was arrested, or not? How did people react? What was that like?
Okay, so I can't remember. I think it was a week later it finally hit our newspaper. We have a once a week newspaper that comes out, a full-sized newspaper, and it was on the front.
Just for your town or for your area?
For our town, and that covers all of Beaver.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing for such a small town. Okay.
Yeah. And it hit the front page. It was all over the front page. And by that point, people in town knew because they saw things online. And of course, Isaac's working out and it's wintertime, but he still goes to the gym. So his friends knew. And all of our friends and family, of course, knew. And of course, told our friends at church so they could pray for him because they're very supportive. And, um, I'm working at the school and I saw that it was in the newspaper. I think I saw something about it or someone texted me while I was at school. So I talked to my two of my bosses before the end of the day and I said, this is what you're going to see. And one of my bosses, one of my bosses came up to me outside and he got right in my face and he said, Mary, I don't care what they say about your son. He's a good man. I know Isaac and he is a good man. And that whole January 6th thing is a bunch of baloney and they're not telling the truth. And I'm like, yes, thank you. Good. And my immediate boss, when I told him it would be in the newspaper, he said, don't worry about it. He said, I've got your back. He said, if any of the students say anything that they shouldn't say, and he said, and for that matter, if any of the teachers say anything they shouldn't say to you, you let me know. And no one has said anything. And now when it first came out in the newspaper and I picked it up from our mailbox on my way home and I read it, I just cried. I was getting out of the car and I was looking at it and I cried. I'm a quiet person, but it just broke my heart. And for at least a year after his arrest, when I would talk about it, I would end up crying. And as you can tell, I've become stronger and realizing that there's things that we can grow from this. There's things that we can learn. And I've also had opportunities to be in DC and talk to senators and congressmen and staffers. And I've learned that I'm not going to shut up about it,
Good for you. Right. Mary, that article, was that on the front page?
It was on the front page. Big. I should see if I can find it. I have my whole pile of newspapers here.
And how was that article written? I mean, was it just an objective piece reporting the facts, or giving both sides, or what was it? What was that piece like?
Oh, I found it. You
found it?
It came out the day after we picked him up at the airport. So it was just 2 days.
Oh, wow.
2 days ago, we got the call. It was almost the entire front page. So here's and I believe it shows more. Let's see here.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
It looks like a long article.
Oh, actually, that other picture, that doesn't have anything to do with it. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It's a half a page.
Half a page on the front page. Dillon Tribune. Okay. Yep. All right, there you go. Second Dillon man. So there was another Dillon man.
There was, yes, and he was urged to go inside by the police officer, and I have seen the video of him walking.
Go inside the Capitol, you mean? Yeah. Inside the building?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he had a little backpack. I think a lot of people had, you take a backpack with you if you're going to be walking around a big city sometimes. And that man did nothing wrong, and he said that he was trying to figure out how to get out of the Capitol building because it's very massive. So he was in the crowd, starting to walk hopefully toward an outer door. And there is overhead video that finally came out that showed a police officer about 6 feet away from this other Dillon man who the police officer took a step forward and hit the back of him with his billy club. And this man told me that he looked around and he couldn't figure out. He had felt something like hit his backpack. He didn't know what it was until he finally was able to obtain that video quite a long time after that.
Okay.
And
All right.
Isaac did not know that man. That man is older than Isaac. He runs a business here in Dillon, so we've known him off and on for years as a businessman. But Isaac didn't know him, and neither of them knew that the other one was going to be there. And actually, I think this man went with some other people to DC. So that was an interesting thing.
Okay. So I want to read the charges that Isaac was charged with. I have that. So that's from a newspaper. There were 7 charges altogether against him, and they were assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers, obstruction of an official proceeding and aiding and abetting, civil disorder, entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds, disorderly and disruptive conduct in a restricted building or grounds, engaging in physical violence in a restricted building or grounds. All right, so these are the charges that were brought against him. Now tell me, it all took a very long time. I think, like 2 years before the trial, right?
Yes, he was charged in March of 2021, and then he didn't go to trial until May of 2023.
Okay. And he received an offer. He received a plea deal. And from my understanding, pretty much everybody received, or very, very few people did not receive one of these plea deals. Tell me about that. So we now know the charges, these 7 charges, serious charges. And how does that contrast with the plea deal that was offered to him?
I believe the plea deal was plead guilty to 1 felony, and then your sentence would be reduced. I don't know for sure how reduced that they offered it to him. But
did they say that in the plea deal? Did they say if you accept the plea deal, then you're going to go to prison for such an amount of time?
They did say something like that, but I think it was still vague as to how long it would be. But they said you're looking at 25 years, or you take a plea deal and then it'll be just a few years.
25 years.
I believe
25 years. That's what murderers get often. I mean,
yeah.
If it's not some absolutely awful murder, then often it's 25 years. 25 years for these 7 charges. Some of them are, by the way, felonies, some of them are misdemeanors. And so you have 7 charges on one side, and then you have a plea deal with just 1 felony and a much reduced, maybe a couple of years or something like that. So that's the choice.
Right. And also, as you know, many times murderers or rapists don't go to prison for even half of that time,
Yes.
But yes,
right.
So he
so they told him that. They said you might be looking at spending 25 years in prison if you don't accept this plea deal and you go to trial.
He like I said, since he's been on his own a lot, he didn't always give me details. I think he didn't really want to worry us too much. But at one point before the trial, he said, "Mom and Dad, you need to know, I wanted to tell you that I'm thinking about not taking the plea deal and just want to run it by you." I told him, after I had already been thinking about that, and I said, do whatever you think is right. I will be fine. We will be fine. You do what's right. Whatever you think is best for you. And I know that some men have wives and a lot of children, and they ended up taking plea deals. We did go talk to an attorney here in our town when this first happened. Within 1 week, we went to her office and hoping that she could represent him. And she's great, but she said, I would advise that you use a public defender because what it's turned out to be is some defendants pay a lot of money and they get the same results because it's already been pre-planned, how everything is going to happen, basically. But she said the attorneys in DC, they know the judges, and she said in that conversation, she said what the DOJ does historically, they pile on the charges, they overcharge everyone, and some of those charges are false, and sometimes all of the charges are false, but they overcharge people to scare them into taking a plea deal. And she said, most of the time people cave because the DOJ has like a 98, 99% guilty rate. And I never forgot that she said most of the time people cave. That word, I thought, ooh, I don't like that word, but
Yes.
and I will never
Yes.
fault anyone who did take a plea deal because it's a very difficult thing to go through. I get that. But
well, I mean, if you think about it, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So Isaac, long story short, he said, I've decided that I'm not taking the plea deal. He said, so.
Okay, fine. First, I have to interrupt you, Mary, because this is so outrageous. So, in the Constitution, it says that every American citizen has the right to a trial by jury. That's like the foundation of law and order. If you are accused of something, if you are accused of a crime, you have the right to a trial, to a fair trial, to due process, and a trial by jury. That's one of the most important principles in law, in law, and for a society, for a civilized society. So I read that apparently, currently, and probably for a while now, the vast majority of criminal cases in the United States are not going to trial, but are resolved by plea deals.
Yes.
And the justification for that is there are way too many cases, and nobody has time, or the judges are completely to do it because everybody wants to get out of jury service, and so on and so forth, and it's very expensive. So let's do this plea deal thing, which cuts costs, and it's going to be speedy, etc., etc. I mean, I can see some justification for that for people who really are guilty, and it's going to be, they're guilty and they know it, and everybody knows it. So just make it short and fine. But the opportunity for abuse is just immense, because if you are, for people who are maybe a little bit guilty, or or maybe guilty, or who knows, or for people who are convinced they are not guilty and who might in fact not be guilty at all, for such people a plea deal is a terrible thing. It's a terrible injustice, really, because you tell, especially if you throw the book at them and overcharge them. I mean, we have so many rules and regulations and laws, and nobody even knows them. I'm sure you can just throw the book at people and tell them, oh, you're going to go to prison for 20, 30 years, whatever. Your life is over. Your life is done. You are ruined. So what you actually do is you deprive them of their right to a trial by jury, right? Because they're not going to choose that.
Exactly.
Most of them.
And I have looked over the last couple of years, I've done some research on even a couple of prisoners that are in the same prison as Isaac now. And I've seen one who refused a plea deal, and then his co-defendants all took plea deals and supposedly incriminated him. But that was the deal. That was the deal.
I know. I've heard this is horrible, terrible. I mean, because it's really cruel. You force, someone who is really innocent. It happens, right? That people get accused and they're innocent of whatever they're accused of. Or maybe they're just a tiny little bit guilty, but not. So a person like that wants to have the opportunity to prove that they are innocent. So to force them by giving them these two options, one, life over, other one, oh yeah, you're going to be a convicted felon, but don't worry, you'll be out in a year or 2 or 3. But you force them to pretend that they are guilty, having done something that they really haven't done. So you force them to kind of how would you say that, to lie about being a criminal. And
Exactly.
that is so unethical. That is so. I mean, a legal system should never force a person to lie about having committed a crime that they didn't commit, just in order to evade the terrible power of the state to send them to prison for a long time. That's a real abuse of power.
Yes. And that is what Isaac said to us when he decided he was not taking a plea deal. He said, I cannot ethically and with, I forgot the word again, but he said, I cannot morally and ethically admit to something that I did not do. He said, I would be lying about that. I cannot do it.
Yes.
Can't
You have to incriminate yourself with, yes, exactly. Right.
And
So,
then
and since
he said, I would be committing perjury. And he said, I can't do that. So now when I see someone.
Exactly. That's the word. He would commit perjury, which is right. And isn't that, yeah. So isn't that illegal? I mean, isn't that illegal in itself, to commit perjury in order not to be sent to, I mean, this whole thing is such an absurdity, or such a perversion of law. Yeah, it's a real perversion of law.
And for that, Isaac is my hero, because that takes a great courage. And now when like I said, I studied one inmate in the same prison as he is, and he's a politician, and he refused a plea deal. And I think he's got 20 something years, but he's appealing it. But I thought, that man is innocent, because he has family. He doesn't have young family, but I thought that it just indicates to me that he had the courage and he had the integrity. That's the word Isaac used. I can't with integrity say that I am guilty. So there's definitely needs to be an outcry about the system and the DOJ, and even the conditions of the prisons. The government made a huge mistake by incarcerating middle-class, hardworking Americans with no criminal records, because now they are coming out and they are telling their families from prison that there is mold on the walls, sewage on the floor, the urinals are not working, the commissary has been closed for an entire month. That's just something.
What is the commissary? What's the commissary?
Oh, that is where you can the inmates can buy things that they can't get in the cafeteria, or they can buy aspirin.
Or like food,
extra.
Okay.
Snacks. They can't get anything fresh at the commissary.
There's sewage on the floor
in some of the prisons. Yeah, and because
what's wrong with the sewage? What's wrong with the sewage system?
There's a lot of
mold on the walls, sewage on the floor.
So I hope that President Trump will look into have someone look into these things and change the conditions, and give more staff, to the prisons, and they treat the prisoners as if they're not humans, rather than trying to rehabilitate them. And yes, some of these prisoners have done some horrible things. There are murderers and rapists, but still, you have to. And some of them maybe don't even act like humans. So there's got to be security, but that doesn't mean that they treat everyone like they're not humans in there. So there has to be some.
So I want to ask you this, Mary. You said that it seems to me, I mean, I never met Isaac. I don't know him, but from your description, he is very calm. He's very composed. He has a lot of self-control. I saw the video from the body camera that this cop was wearing, and he was really just standing there very still, not saying anything, just looking, taking in the entire scene, completely peaceful. When he talked to you about this plea deal, I mean, what is your impression? What did he go through? How did he come to terms with these 7 charges that were levied against him?
Well, he worked out a lot, you know.
He worked out in the gym.
A lot of weightlifting.
Oh, okay.
Things like that.
That's actually a good idea to get rid of your anger, just lifting some really heavy weights.
Yes, and having the unknown hanging over your head for all of 21, all of 22, and halfway into 2023. And I didn't understand all of the terms in the judicial system, but he had his trial in May, but then we had to go back to DC again in September for his sentencing. So the trial in May with just the judge, no jury, where the judge took catnaps, and that was Judge Royce Lambert, and he does need.
So you said it was a bench. That's called a bench trial, right? That you don't have a jury, just the judge. The judge makes the decision, and that's it.
That is correct. Yes.
And you can request that as the defendant. You can say, I don't want a jury. I want a bench trial. You can do that?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he was completely at the mercy of the judge.
Correct.
And the judge was Royce Lambert.
Yes.
Is that his name?
Yes.
And this is the famous sleeping judge.
Exactly. That's him.
So what happened? He's an elderly man, apparently, and he falls asleep?
Yes, he has to come in. He has to have help when he comes in. I believe he's in his late 80s for sure. And he comes in with a walker, and then they help him into a seat. And
oh my goodness, maybe he should retire.
Yes. But now perhaps be impeached. I believe all of these judges need to be impeached because they did not treat these defendants. They treated them as if they were guilty until proven innocent. And I just recently read an article where the DC courts said they are never given these minor cases for protests. They said that usually always goes to other lower courts, but every J6 defendant basically requested a change of venue, which Isaac did, meaning send it back to Montana and have a jury of his peers judge this. But it was refused with all of the defendants that I know of. They were not allowed to have their trials elsewhere. So it was.
Is that unusual? Is that unusual that a request like that is refused?
Oh yeah, it's not right. Because it's obviously it was not a jury. It wasn't going to be a jury of his peers, so that's why he chose a bench trial. And so the judge would take cat naps, and then he'd wake up, and he found Isaac. He declared him guilty on all charges. It didn't matter what
all charges.
Yeah, it didn't matter what the evidence.
Is that what Isaac? So Isaac must have probably expected that at that point, right?
Well,
because of the way he was treated.
I am the type of person that hopes for the best, but I'm ready for the worst, and I do a lot of research, so I didn't expect it to be good at all. I think Isaac had some hope, and his attorney was pretty good, and she had some hope. I saw how things were going, but still, when you have, the U.S. government finds Isaac Sturgeon guilty on this count, and they read the counts, I don't think Isaac expected it to be completely all that way. No, I was there for the trial. My husband said, he's retired. He said, I'm going to stay here. But then for the sentencing later on, we both flew back to DC for that. Now, how Isaac was handling it, he was quiet over those 22, 23, for those 2 years, he was quiet. Sometimes we would talk about some things, but I could tell that he really preferred not to talk about it, especially as the trial got closer. And he and I have talked about that later. He has even said, I might have been a little bit brisk and harder at times, Mom. And sometimes he wasn't mean, but he was brief and brisk, and I could tell he just didn't want to talk about it. That's how he dealt with it. He just kind of internalized it. And he told his girlfriend at one point, he said, normally I'm a pretty funny guy if I don't have an indictment hanging over my head. And he said that just offhandedly to her, and it really made her laugh because, yes, it was a heavy burden to carry. So he was much, much quieter for those 2 years, much quieter. That's how he dealt with it.
Interesting. But he wasn't, it doesn't sound like he was angry. Yeah, I can imagine how that takes the humor out of you, having that hang over you for sure. So he gets convicted of all 7 charges after refusing the plea deal. And then, so that was in May 2023. And then it took how many? June, July, August, September, another 4 months until the sentencing. So that must have been torture, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you have 4 months to think about for how many years you're going to be sent to prison.
Yeah.
So September 2023, the verdict. So what was the verdict? What was the sentence?
So the sentence, we got word, the sentencing, I believe, was going to be on a Monday or Tuesday. And on the Friday before the sentencing, okay, so his attorney had said they'll probably ask for 6 years, 5 years, and you'll probably they'll ask for 5 years. The prosecution asks for a certain amount of years. And she said, and then you'll probably serve 3 years, is what she thought. On Friday, before we flew out of Montana to get there, we got word that the prosecution said they wanted 11 years. It just
11.
It floored us.
Wow.
And
11 years.
So Steve and I were allowed to talk to the judge at the sentencing in the courtroom on that. Maybe it was a Monday. It might have been on Monday afternoon. And we both talked to separately, had things ready to say about Isaac. Oh, and
that was the same judge? That was the same judge,
yeah.
Judge Lambert.
Yes, same
that you
judge.
talked to.
Yes.
Okay.
And also over that period of time, I gathered over 40 letters of character reference on Isaac's behalf by military friends.
Wow, that's a lot. Like
a lot.
40?
Over 40, yes, 40.
Wow.
And
that's a good number.
It is. I have the pile of them here. The paper copies, and it was some of his clients. There were friends, people from all around the country, police officers, military people, even a couple of people who disagrees with him politically, but they love him and they know him. It went on, and the judge supposedly read all of those. I hope he did. But it ended up that the judge sentenced him to 6 years. It was just shocking. It was devastating.
So the prosecution asked for 11 years.
Yes.
The prosecution wanted 11 years. Judge, you talk to the judge before the sentencing. You talk to him. Your husband talks to him. You give him all these letters of reference, and then the judge gives him 6 years.
Yes, and the judge
in prison.
Had letters of reference prior to the sentencing. He had plenty of time to.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then there were also 3 years of supervised release, correct? Yes. After the 6 years.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Which is a pretty serious thing, if I understand it correctly, because if anything happens during these 3 years of supervised release, where you're probably watched pretty closely, if something happens. Maybe, I don't know what, but it doesn't sound like it has to be something very drastic.
No, something pretty simple, and you
serve out the rest of your supervised release years in prison.
Right, and they're doing this
So that would be hanging over him for 3 years afterwards.
Yeah, and they're doing this to hundreds of other January 6th defendants and families, parents, young people.
You told me in December, just this month, earlier this month, a couple was arrested for, they also didn't go inside the Capitol. They were arrested now. Can you imagine? Like, what, 4 years later?
They raid people's homes at 2 a.m. Thankfully,
Yeah.
of course, they didn't raid Isaac's home because he was overseas. But yeah, they raid people's homes and they aim their guns with the red pointers, shining the light on people's children in their homes. They have guns on everybody and they break their doors down. It's really over the top ridiculous. That's why there are FBI whistleblowers and people who have stepped up.
Yeah, and good for them. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
I wanted to mention one thing that I found very curious. You mentioned to me that when Isaac was arrested, or I don't know when exactly, but you mentioned that his credit card, was a Discovery card, was canceled, that all his travel points were canceled. He was banned from Airbnb. His Instagram account was canceled. And then also, as you already mentioned, both his phones were taken by the FBI and not returned. So this thing with canceling his travel points, his credit card, banning him from Airbnb and Instagram, what is that? Is that, I have never heard, I mean, this kind of cancellation, that is not usually something that's supposed to happen when somebody gets arrested, or am I mistaken about that?
You're correct. This is very unusual, unorthodox, very it's a travesty. Yeah, he lost all of that. And there's other January 6th defendants whose banks canceled them and said, get your money out. We don't want you. I think a lot of it.
Oh my God.
Stirred up by
the banks. Yeah. The banks canceled them. So they lost their bank. They unbanked them.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And many others had credit cards canceled and Airbnb canceled and their online accounts frozen, just a lot of ridiculous things, I think, because of mainstream news media. And yeah, there's a lot of criminal things going on against these January 6th defendants.
Right. So I looked up which rights convicted felons lose once they are convicted felon. There are some stuff. Some states don't allow them to vote, or restrictions on voting while they're in prison, and sometimes also afterwards. Traveling abroad, the right to bear arms, or own guns, which is bad for Isaac because he's a hunter.
Right.
They are not qualified for jury service. Employment in certain fields is impossible. Public social benefits and housing is also either restricted or not available at all. Parental benefits, but it doesn't mention anything, of having bank accounts canceled, having travel points taken away, having credit cards canceled, social media accounts canceled. These are not things you lose when you are convicted. I wanted to ask you, yes, so he is sentenced to 6 years in prison, and he was put into a prison in Ohio. Now, Ohio is far from Montana. It's like, what, a 2-hour flight, 3-hour flight?
Oh, it's a day. It's several hours to fly there with a connecting point in Chicago or
okay. Right. Okay. So for you, it's a big trip and it's expensive. So they put Isaac way far away from his family. Why on earth? Why couldn't he be in a prison that is closer to Montana? You don't have prisons in Montana?
We do not have a federal prison in Montana. No, not a federal one.
Oh, really? Right. Not a single one?
No. I think they are regional. Well, they have more federal prisons in some states. And I think at least one.
You don't have enough criminals in Montana. That's why.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yes.
But still, there must be a prison that's closer than that one in Ohio where he ended up in, or not?
Yes. So there is a prison in Colorado, but I was doing research. Again, I was doing research as we were coming up closer to the trial because I just want to be prepared. And the prison in the Colorado, I think, listed and researched as the worst in the country. And I had read some things about it. Now they have different levels. There's low, medium, and high. And it was the medium and high prison that have a bad reputation there. And I don't know much about the low one, but I had heard of some prisoners, January 6th prisoners, being put in the wrong prison. So I I really did not want him to have to go to anything in Colorado in that federal
Did he
facility.
have the option to go to? I mean, with his sentencing, was he able to go to a low security prison? I mean, he was charged with all these things, violence and all that stuff. Can you go to a low security prison when you're charged with these things?
That's an interesting point. It shows the inconsistency because, yes, he is in a low security prison. And okay.
Wow, I mean, he's so dangerous. How can he should be in this maximum security prison?
I know.
Shouldn't he?
Okay, so it's very telling. It's very telling. So I did research, and there's, prisons in California and Oregon. Then somehow I connected. And there's various January 6th chat groups on Telegram and various places. And I connected with a mom whose son had the same judge as Isaac, but her son is 10 years younger. And I did some research on them. Her husband is a school principal. She works at a library. And it was obvious just looking at the family that this kid probably never even had a speeding ticket, and he just ended up touching a sign that passed overhead and he got charged with assault. So she and I connect.
What, he assaulted the sign?
Yeah. It's because the sign was passed over and set down in front of the police, and maybe it bumped a police officer. All it takes is a bump to charge you with assault. And so through her, I realized, so her son was found guilty. No, her son took a plea deal early on. She told me later, I kind of wished he wouldn't have, but that's neither here nor there. But he had the same judge, and that judge put him away for 3 years.
For touching a sign.
Yes. And so
that sounds appropriate.
I found out what prison that he was in, and she said it seems to be fairly safe. Turns out that prison is 1 hour from where my husband grew up in Ohio, and that's where his sister lives. And so I did all this research. There is a federal prison closer to us in South Dakota that seemed to be pretty good. So when the trial was done, he was found guilty, and we were coming up closer in September to the sentencing. I asked Isaac, he's a grown man, and he's lived on his own for years, but we've, been with him a little bit more through this. And I said, would you mind? I said, I've done my research, and you know how I do that. And I said, there are a couple of prisons, and I explained all of this to him, that would be better than the other ones that are in our region of the country. And if you were in the one in Ohio, at least we would have a free place to stay. And he said, sure, you can give a short list to my attorney. So I gave her the name of the one in South Dakota, which was the one that we really wanted because it's closer. And then the one in Ohio. And of course, the judge chose the one farther away, or I don't know how that works. If it's availability, I don't know. But that's what
he didn't explain. He didn't explain the decision to you?
No. But it's sad that he's so far away, but it has given me opportunity when I have gone to see him. Like in the summertime, I had more time. I rented a car, and that's expensive, but I rented a car and drove to DC and talked to people there and spent time.
Wow, that's a long drive, Mary. That's like days on the road, isn't it?
From Ohio to DC, I think it was 5 hours.
Oh, I thought from Montana to DC.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. So I would fly to Ohio, and then after I visited Isaac.
Okay. Yeah, that's more manageable.
Right. So I could advocate for him. And there's a couple of places that I can stay for free there. So that's very, very fortunate for me.
That's great.
So that some other defendants are not so fortunate, and they do place them many hours away from their loved ones in a facility, and it's not right. It's not right at all.
So he's been in this low security prison in Ohio for a year now. He went into jail. He went to jail on January 1st, 2024. Is that correct?
January
2nd?
The 4th.
January 1st.
4th.
Oh, the 4th. Okay.
Yeah.
January 4th. So it's almost a year.
Yes.
How's he doing?
He's doing great. He calls me once in a while. The phone calls only are 10 minutes long. And if he calls and I miss it, he can't leave a voicemail. He just has to hang up. He calls his girlfriend.
Why can't he leave a voicemail?
Oh, because I have to punch the number 5 to accept the call. So if you don't accept the call, then you can't even hear his voice. It just hangs up. I can tell though, if he calls, I do hear the recording on my answering, on my voicemail. I'll hear the automated voice telling me to touch number 5 to receive the call.
Oh, so you know it was him.
And I see it on caller ID. Have that too. But he calls his girlfriend much more often, every other day or so, and that's good. But he's very calm. You know, they listen to everything that is said. They read every letter that I send him. I always mail him a letter on Monday, which I did today. I email him for his business and his house that is under construction that he's trying to get.
Right. But what's life in prison like for him?
This prison is, like I say, pretty safe, but he doesn't tell me a lot of things. I have heard from other families of loved ones there that there is mold on the walls and the conditions are not the best. And it depends on the guard. Some guards are decent, you know, that they have to be strict because they are dealing with criminals in there. And then other guards are just nasty, but he works out. Again, he works out. He has a couple of buddies, other January 6th defendants who work out with him. One man has a business that he had to leave behind, several children and his wife, that they work out together every day. The meals are not, he told me this last week when I saw him that the meals are going downhill. They're not as good and they're very small. It's like, at this prison, the meals are
very small. So he's hungry. He has to go to this commissary thing to get more food.
Right. And the prices at the commissary are just really outrageous. Yeah, they're outrageously priced.
How much? How much?
Oh, I had a commissary list. I should have brushed up on that. I'm thinking probably $5 for an individual small bag of chips. You know, something like
what? $5? Well, they have even higher inflation in prison than out of prison.
Oh yes.
How did they manage to do that?
I don't know.
Wow,
they can do.
Wow, what a ripoff.
Someone had.
Well, he shouldn't eat chips anyway. Bad for him. But
he likes to eat healthy, so I'm just looking at a commissary list. But he doesn't buy a whole lot of junk food. He tries to eat, he always eats fresh fruit if he can, but he said some of the inmates, they'll make some kind of hooch or liquor or some alcoholic something out of the apples. So now they don't get apples. So
how do they do that? How do they do that in prison?
They are very ingenious.
They're ingenious. You have to ask him next time. I want to know. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, he tells me the interesting things. They have like maybe a foot locker and they can turn it on its side and make it into a little oven. So it's very interesting.
Oh.
They don't have
wow. Yeah.
They no longer have a fresh salad bar. I'm not sure why, but he really misses that.
Oh my God, they got rid of the fresh salad bar?
Yeah.
Oh, not good. I hope he gets some burgers and, some meat. Well, anyway, so you just saw him, right? You just saw him a couple of days ago.
Yes. Yeah.
How was he?
He's his calm self. Oh, when he has called me on the phone before, in my head, I might be worried about trying to get the construction going on. It's just a one-room cabin that he's trying to build for himself rather than rent from other people. And always when he calls me, it calms me down. And he doesn't even maybe know that I'm worried, but I might ask a couple of questions and he'll say, "It's okay. Don't worry. We'll just give him some space with that electrician or whoever it is."
Wow.
We'll just wait.
Okay.
So when I saw him at the prison, same thing, we have our hugs and then we sit down and he's laid back, and he talks more than I've ever heard him talk because he has so many stories to tell us because it's a whole different culture in there. So he tells us.
I bet. I bet it must be interesting. Yeah, you're right. It must be very interesting. So,
Well,
how did he react to the election, to the 2024 election?
that's a good question. Coming up to the election, other inmates said, "What are you going to do if Trump doesn't get in?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to go work out, and I'm going to be thankful that I'm living and breathing at the end of the day." What do you do? And he said before he went in, he said, "I want to come out a better man." And he told me at visitation one of the days, he said, there's a new January 6er in prison and he's discouraged. And he said, but I tell him, we've got to become a better person. You've got to get yourself a routine. You've got to try to work out, even though the outside recreation area has been closed down, I think, for weeks and weeks now. They can't go out in the grass. There's no snow on the ground right now. They have to go in the cage, which is like a big fenced in cement area with basketball courts on it. And they just walk circles around it. And he said, but you want to be better when you come out than when you went in. That's how we have to look at this thing. So that
Is Isaac a religious person?
He probably doesn't read his Bible and he doesn't go to church as much as I do, but he knows the Lord and he's very grateful for what God does for him. So that's, he has even said, I'm a Christian and he's a Christian, but he has said to me in the past, Mom, I'm not a very good Christian. But, on the inside, I know my own faults. And even though it might not be as obvious, I'm not the best Christian either. I strive to be, but he gets busy with other things. So he's very aware of the Lord and he's very grateful, is how I would say. And he has a Bible, and I assume he reads it once in a while, periodically. I don't know. He reads books, and he's a great guy.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you say he's grateful. So what is he grateful for right now? I mean, it's hard to be grateful when you are put into prison for a long time for nothing, really. So how does he keep his gratefulness?
He's grateful for a family who supports him. He's grateful for people who have donated. He has a Give, Send, Go account. He's grateful. When this all came out in the newspaper, he lost some of his clients that he does landscaping and lawn care for, but then he gathered other ones. And this last summer, one of his friends took over the business for the summer. And so he's grateful for that he hasn't lost all of his clients. I had little old ladies before when he went to prison. They said, I know them. I see them at the store and they say, Mary, what am I going to do without him? I said, He's going to have somebody take care of his business as best they can and learn the equipment. He's grateful for health so far. When you think about it, that's been important to me. And I've taught my children that in the worst of circumstances, you can still, like he said, be grateful that at the end of the day, he's still living and breathing. So there's a lot more to be grateful for than what we realize.
And he must also be grateful for you, I mean,
he thanks me every time I visit him. And
I bet he does.
And it's drawn us closer to each other. And as a mom, I've always been careful to stay out of my kids' business, leave them alone as adults, especially. But he has opened up to me more. He's always opened up to his sisters more, but I appreciate that privilege that he opens up to me and talks about some things more than he ever used to. So that's, I enjoy all I can.
And now he's probably also very grateful that Trump has been reelected.
I hope that there's a blanket pardon because they would never do this to Antifa or BLM. And there were no police cars being burned and flipped over during this whole January 6th thing. And a blanket pardon, but a pardon of innocence. These people, and there needs to be restitution and reimbursement for a lot of people who've lost everything. Some people have lost their spouses. Their spouses left them. So there's people in much worse situations than Isaac, but yet he's lost a lot of income. I'm very careful because he has bills. He has vehicle payments and equipment payments and property payments. But we are very grateful that Trump won. I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, so Christopher Wray will step down as head of the FBI before Trump is inaugurated, and Kash Patel will take over the leadership position at the FBI. Cannot think of a better man to take over that position.
Right.
So this coming year should bring us closer to the truth, to what actually happened on January 6th.
Yes.
And, before we close, I just want to raise some of the questions that have still not been answered. Really fundamental things that weren't answered by this sham. What was it called? This commission that the Democrats did. This J6 commission or committee. I made a little list here of just some of the questions. We don't really know why Nancy Pelosi didn't accept Trump's offer of sending 10,000 National Guardsmen to protect the Capitol Hill, which should have been a no-brainer, and any responsible politician would have accepted it, because huge crowd, you need to have crowd control, you need to do it's a dangerous situation no matter what, even if you expect everybody to be peaceful. There's a huge crowd. Totally irresponsible. Why? Nancy Pelosi is a smart woman. I'm sure she's aware of all these things about crowds. So why? Then why were the Capitol grounds at the Capitol itself not protected by, kind of barricades or something, not just these flimsy, stupid bike racks? I mean, it's just a joke. Also, it took forever for reinforcements to show up to help these policemen that were totally overpowered. And why did the FBI lie for years about having their own agents among the rioters? Now, they finally say it was 26. Who knows how many it really was? Maybe this is the real number. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's many more. We don't know. But what I think is really interesting? Even if you have just 26 FBI agents, there is video. There is hundreds and thousands of hours of video, right? I don't recall seeing any video ever of any of these 26 undercover FBI agents attempting to restrain rioters from breaking into the Capitol or restraining them from committing violence. Nothing. That's what their job would be if you have these undercover agents there. That would be the only legitimate role that I can see, to have such people there to make sure that things don't get out of control, and to restrain people, and to try to make sure that they, if that's, there is not a single scene that I have seen where people have done such a thing. Why is that? There should be video like that. On the contrary, there is video like from this Ray App guy who was running around everywhere on January 5 and 6, urging people to go into the Capitol, putting them, just trying to convince them to go in, and then whispering into somebody's ear before he pushes down. He always keeps out of actually doing something. He is there inciting and communicating with other people, but he never does anything. He doesn't push down the fence. He doesn't walk into the Capitol. So, there's clearly... He's clearly working for the feds. He's doing something. And then, of course, he wasn't arrested forever, didn't get a draconian sentence when finally they brought some misdemeanor against him. So also, why we never got to the bottom of why the police shot these rubber bullets into the crowd and the tear gas when the crowd was still just standing there. They weren't trying to get to the Capitol, into it. They were just standing there. And so many more things. Do you remember these gallows, these fake gallows?
Yes.
That were put up? Well, I read that they were put up while Trump was still speaking at the ellipse. So there was hardly anybody there when they were put up. Right. So the police, there was some police there. The gallows were standing there for an hour or 2 hours before these crowds came. And nobody said, hey, guys, these gallows are going to come. what the hell was going on there, right?
And I think
and
that
then
was before the Trump supporters even came. So who?
yeah, what was going on there when they first started? Why did they collect all the bike racks?
Yeah.
Why did they push them? It just was just a couple of people. We don't know who they are. They push them down, and then somebody collects them all so that nobody knows. All these tens of thousands of people who swarmed over the grounds, they couldn't know that they were trespassing. The whole thing with Sicknick's death, of course, and the lying about it, and
also Representative Clay Higgins, months and months ago, said he had for sure identified over 200 undercover FBI agents and confidential human sources, people who were there undercover. And I believe in January of this year, that was almost a year ago, that he said that. And he said that Mike Johnson we need to get to the bottom of that.
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the really big question is what was going on? What was the interest of government officials to incite riots? When you look at it from their perspective, why would they want the Capitol building to be entered by a large number of these protesters? They knew they were coming.
Yeah.
So you can say, okay, this was the hour where these 147, I think it was 147 Republicans who wanted to object to the state's election results. That was their hour. That was their time to speak and to be heard by not just the other senators and congressmen, but the entire country. They got their say. They got to object, which happens all the time, by the way. It's not something unusual. Democrats do it, Republicans do it very often when a new president is elected. It's nothing uncommon at all. But I think many people just don't know that. But because of this disruption, they never got that chance. They all had to leave, and then when they came back way later, a lot of these Republicans, under the shock of the events, just withdrew their objections, and it was over. You really wonder, was that the purpose of it all? And then also, of course, to turn it against Trump and say, well, you are a J6er too. You are seditious. You incited this, what they framed as sedition, and they prosecuted him for it.
Right.
So that's the really big question that hasn't been answered. And I think now with the inauguration of Trump, this will change. So next year should be exciting for you. And Trump said he's going to pardon all the J6ers who didn't commit any violence, and Isaac certainly didn't. So he should be out of prison soon.
Yes, and I hope that just because there's an assault charge, that they don't look at that and say, well, that was the violence. I did hear President Trump on Meet the Press when they said, what about these people who have the assault charges? He said they didn't have a choice. He said they didn't have a choice. They were being attacked. So yes, that will be, I'm looking forward to January 20th.
Yes. No, I don't know how this pardoning thing is going to happen, but I'm sure that they're not just going to say, oh, he was charged with all these awful things, so we cannot pardon him. I'm sure they're going to look at the case. They certainly should, and I think they will, and see what actually happened, and is there any ground for these charges. And even if, I cannot imagine really, but even if they say, oh yes, because he touched the barricade, and we don't know if he pushed it a little bit against the, even if, so I think spending a year in prison is way more than that deserves.
Yes.
I want to thank you so much, Mary. It was wonderful hearing this whole story, and I thought it came really alive, what happened, and also the whole injustice of it, and the perversion of the whole thing, and also how it's portrayed in a very different way. I'm sure there are J6ers who really were violent and who did hurt policemen, and they should be punished. But also for these cases, it should be looked into whether they deserve the punishment that they got, because, yeah, they should be punished, but not way more draconian than other people. Politics shouldn't play any role in it.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.